This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
All right, everybody, welcome to No Filter Friday on Public House Media, where we discuss all things #MeToo from inside of Hollywood. And I'm sitting here with the illustrious Robert Kandall.
Yes.
Who is a Mantor, which I've never heard of before. Did you coin that term, Mantor?
One of my agents, my podcast agent.
Your podcast agent?
Yeah, Kelly Glover of the Talent Squad came up with that, and I liked it.
It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
It's a good, you've got the corner market on it. So you wrote this lovely book, Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller, and
Indeed.
There you are in the back of it. It's funny, I was just talking on our my last episode about how we might have a No Filter Friday book club, and I think you've cemented the idea of having a No Filter Friday book club. So you went to Burning Man when you were 28.
Yes.
And it changed your life.
Yes.
And you became the man that you are now.
Yes, through a long and crazy road. Crazy journey. The epic's hero's journeys, for sure.
For sure. Absolutely. And in most people say, like, I went to Burning Man. And then all these things happened. But yours is, like, pretty... sounds like destiny to me.
It was... Well, the way I like to tell my story was normal. I was 28. Then my first wife, Carol, said, let's go to Burning Man. And this was 1998. So it was a mere, 18,000 people compared to the 80,000
that it is today.
And the only thing I knew about Burning Man was this picture book that we'd seen, which is naked people walking around encrusted in mud. I guess there was a mud bath that previous year when the book was done. And I was like, I'm never going to that. Those are for those other people. That's not for me. But Carol was like, come on, let's go. And I was like, all right, I'll go. Go for her. And then what happened was 3 or 4 really amazing experiences. We talked about sexuality. I did magic mushrooms for the first time. I saw this other part of me. So it was a life-changing experience.
Would you call it an awakening?
I would undoubtedly call it an awakening. No question asked.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool that you're like, no, I'm not that person, and you get there and you're like, I'm so this person. That's totally me.
Well, the funny part was I had a better time. I felt more at ease there than Carol did.
Really?
She was the hippie massage school person. I was the downtown San Francisco yuppie, shirt and tie every day, everything very clean and orderly and neat. And then as soon as I got there was this part of me that just woke up. And it was just like, whoo, and it was a truly amazing experience.
How fantastic. So Burning Man started your journey to becoming the Mantor. So what was your first thing that you did when you got home?
We just started to talk and experiment. This was San Francisco in the late 90s, so there was the rave culture.
It was a scene.
It was a scene. So their sexuality was available. It really was the hub of a lot of great classes and awakenings for many people. So the first thing that happened after Burning Man was about 8 months later. I went to my first workshop on sexuality and had my ego destroyed and my whole life woken up from a moment.
Wow. So you had two for one deal.
Two major experiences.
That's interesting. Why did you feel like it crushed your ego to go to this class?
Well, I'll tell you the story. It's the first chapter of the book, just to put me on even keel with anyone reading it.
Totally.
So I, 8 months after Burning Man, 9 months after Burning Man, go to this class on sexuality. And I was worked in downtown San Francisco, was smart, but not very emotionally intelligent, but book smart, and went into this class. And then we go down to the basement, and it was definitely a hippie house. There were mandalas, there was incense, there were naked children running around. And so I walked into this basement where there's 18, 20 other people and the instructor, this guy named Erwan Devan and his partner Allison, on the front couch. And I sit down the circle and they say, okay, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I do my introduction first. And in that introduction, I thought I was eloquent. I thought I was funny. I thought I was smart. I thought Erwan was going to make room for me on the couch so I can co-teach with him. And instead, when I finished my introduction, he said, hey, do you know your wife's crying? And she was sitting right next to me. And I had absolutely no idea of how chauvinistic, misogynistic, insensitive I was. And it was the first time she probably felt safe enough to cry. So, and then Erwan, who's still teaching, by the way, did the most awful thing. He said, okay, who's next? And I got to sit in the burn for 2 hours of other people's introductions, thinking, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. But instead I stayed, and that was the awakening for the rest of my life.
That's so interesting. What did your wife say to you when you finally could talk, like after these?
I went immediately to repair my ego. And this is what most men do, especially. Something happens, and the first thing we want to do, rather than ask the question, are you okay? It was really like, please validate me so I don't feel bad. Mm-hmm. And I was angry. I was angry at Erwan. I was angry at Carol. I was angry at all those people. But really, I was really angry at myself. I just didn't have the acumen to look inward. I was looking externally for letting me know if I was doing right or wrong. And so she basically said, I'm not ready to talk to you, which had me sit like a pariah. Like I felt like I was walking around the room with those other 18 strangers looking at me like I was the asshole who made his wife cry. So it was
day one, minute
first
one.
hour, exactly, of my life. So it was horrible.
Oh gosh. So that was the catalyst. What else did you learn in this class besides all of that?
I don't know how much I learned in that class besides that moment. I was so in shell shock. I mean, the main thing I learned was choice. Because I had that choice when he said, hey, do you know your wife's crying? Who's next? I had the choice of standing up, demanding she go with me or leave, go back to my status quo, go back to the man cave, go back to my ignorance. Or the second choice is, okay, there's something here. There's something I need to learn. There's a wake-up call. And I picked the latter, which has actually led to the most amazing life. But we all have these choices. John Gottman calls them sliding door moments. In the movie Sliding Door, where she goes left or right, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think it was. Mm-hmm. In his book, he calls it sliding door movements, when you decide. And I just chose to stay, sit in the burn, and learn.
And learn the lesson.
It hasn't stopped in 20 years.
Yeah, you're still sitting in it.
Exactly.
You're in motion, but still living in that. That's really interesting. I've never heard anybody say that before. So, if you're still learning, how did you get into so we'll cut to now, I guess you could say, because a thing that I talk about on my show all the time is that, like, yes, we talk about women in Me Too and them being taken advantage of and being preyed upon, but also 1 in 6 boys is molested. Mm-hmm. And that's also a huge problem. And it wasn't really until like Terry Crews came out with his story of, another man agent did this to me from this giant agency and I just had to deal with it and I couldn't do anything about it. And his story, like, that was like basically the first and only person that's really been able to break down some walls of, like, it's not just women, it's men too. It's a predator problem, not a prey problem. So how are you dealing with that now, today, currently?
The main thing I want people to understand is the concept of vulnerability. I don't know if you're a fan of Brené Brown, but she did her TED Talk on it. I'm just reading now the Dare to Lead book, Daring Greatly. It's this concept of vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that men are not taught. We're actually taught the opposite. We're taught to build up walls, to defend, to ensure. But to me, vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability is willing to say, there's something going on that's not optimal. How do we, a collective we, either in a couple or in a corporation or in a school or in the priesthood, how do we start talking about these things that are happening that no one's talking about? How do we have the ethical conversations? How do we have the chargy conversations? It takes vulnerability, because you might see some things you're doing that is not pleasant or can be toxic or can be hurtful. And our ability to say, please give me feedback, to understand before trying to be understood, is the next step. And so the book and my work is really about slowing down, listening, validating, hearing, and up-leveling.
Interesting. I think vulnerability is like a word that gets like thrown around a lot, and we don't really like delve into like what it really, really actually means. It is, because it's like in my opinion, it's like an activity. It's a verb. Being vulnerable, like it's something that you have to actively do. As somebody who's went around the world and back interviewing survivors of sex crimes and gender-based violence and stuff like that, I've noticed that the people that weren't supported and like coming out with their story, whether it was like something that was seeming like an invisible injury or a very visible injury, when they weren't supported, it seems to me like it was, they came out to somebody, or they told somebody their story, and that person didn't want to deal with like the effort that it would require to, you can't really ever fully heal from that, but to
confront it.
Yeah, to confront it and to
Right.
come to the other side of it.
Right. Yeah, I have a client. I won't give you too many details, but I'll give you the high-level details.
Okay.
She was raped when she was 11. She was intoxicated. And then she had to report the person who was 18.
Yeah.
Then she had to deal with, he got justice, or he went to jail for it. But then she had to live in the town where everyone behind the back said that was the girl who put herself in the position to be raped. So in my mind, she was raped twice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
She was raped once physically, raped emotionally, energetically. And which one do you think is more painful, more toxic, more impactful? It's the latter. And so to go back to vulnerability, we live in a society, Trump has even said this, deny, 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 deny. You can see it in everything he does across the board, the whole metoo movement,
Oh, yeah, I don't know how many times I've read categorically denies
Right.
X amount of allegations. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, it's the same thing. It's like every single attorney, every single spokesperson for all of these people, they use the same, like, it's like the same 3 sentences
Right.
over and over and over again.
which is the second rape. Like, the Kavanaugh Blasey Ford, I was so intrigued by it a year ago. Just read everything, and it was almost exactly a year ago in a week. I
Yeah,
think
something like that. It was really close.
October 5th, yeah, when we talked about it. And so I was just looking, and I was like, what would happen if Kavanaugh just said, listen, I don't remember this, I don't understand this, I don't remember you, but let's sit and talk about it. Let's have a one-on-one conversation or a mediated conversation. I want to hear your experience. I want to understand what you're feeling. I may not remember a thing authentically or not, but just that first step of allowing...
Like, I will hear you under X, Y, and Z conditions.
Right. And that doesn't happen. And that's the second rape. And that's how the chasm continues to exist in our society between predators and the victims. People who are preyed upon. It's just, one rape and then the second rape. And so my belief in the word vulnerability is the Fords or the Weinsteins or, the senators or...
Whoever, it doesn't matter
Exactly.
who it is, named or not.
Right. The teacher who looked at a schoolgirl the wrong way, not even physically touched, or has an energy, or actually has a desire and keeps it inside, but still it is impacting the young schoolgirls running around in shorts. Like, whatever it is, just the opportunity to say, this is what the impact of your energy does to me. Wow, I didn't know that. I apologize. Like, whatever that is, how much healing we would have. But we don't, because it's deny, deny, deny.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a few of the people that I interviewed on my little trek around the world talked about how, they told someone and it went horribly wrong in the other direction. It's like, that didn't happen to you. It's like, you weren't even there. Like, how do you have zero inkling of what did or didn't happen? You have no idea. And I have the same experience with, I have an uncle that's in jail for molesting his stepkids for many, many, many years. And I've had other people tell me, like, yeah, he did. We don't know. I've never pulled the transcripts for that trial. Like, I don't know exactly what these girls said or didn't say. But I could find it as a matter of public record. But they're like, yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me, because when we were X amount of years old and 2 sisters close in age, just like they were, he did this, this, and this. And everybody's like, nope, he didn't do that. You're making up lies. It's like, that's really interesting that they're lying, because he's sitting in jail for 25 years for literally the same thing.
Right.
So really, are we going to keep denying this? And there's been this meme floating around that I really, really love, that it's like, people will disown a gay family member, but they'll protect the pedophile family member. It's very, very strange, but it's so true.
So true.
So true.
Well, people have the question, what does this mean about me? So if I have a gay family member, did I do something wrong? Maybe there's part of me that's gay. There's always that personalizing it and taking it on. Our own ego gets involved. And a pedophile, if the world found out about that pedophile, what would that mean about me? How many times have we heard, like, my reputation is being impacted by our siblings and our children, rather than confronting, okay, this is happening. How do I actively support the environment, the community, the entire container, rather than just protect my own deeply conscious or unconscious self-interest?
Yeah, when I went to Jamaica to go try to interview people, because apparently 40% of the Jamaican population, their first sexual experience is either straight up rape or just coerced. And nobody would really talk to me. They'd say some whispers like on the low, but they wouldn't talk to me on the record. And they said it's because that most of the time, like, the family pedophile is also the only person that has a job. So, like, they get to do whatever they want because they're the only one with an income.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to the conversation of that, like, a lot of these sexual predators, like, it's not necessarily about the sex. It's about the power and the control. Like, I can do this to you, and there's nothing that you can do about it, and everybody will support me.
Well, for me, it's more interesting. I use the word interesting in a value-neutral way. What had that person have to use force for power? What was their dynamic with their parents and their grandfathers and great-parents? I mean, ancestral trauma, I don't know if you're a knower of that, but, trauma can go down up to 7 generations.
Oh, I'm sure.
Passed down easily from 7 generations. And so if you look at, you look at someone who hurt someone in this generation, what happened to the grandfather, great-grandfather? Where was that power, and how is that passed down? And then if you look at people now in current time, just listening to this podcast or knowing someone, how can you stop toxicity in the next 7 generations?
It's a big thing to, like, be able to, they're calling it, like, generational curses on the interwebs these days. But it's true, though, because I can follow my line of trauma all the way back to wherever I can. I don't even know these people for the most part.
Right.
It's very easy to see who did what to who, because hurt people. And you're right, unless you actively go out in your life and say, I'm stopping this. We're not doing this anymore. It will continue.
Right.
Like, you have to actively stop it. It's kind of I guess you could kind of say it's like the default mode. Like, it will just continue to run until somebody's like, nah, we're not doing this anymore. And they have to turn it around. And turning it around is an incredible effort.
Like, I'm a born and bred chauvinist, down to my core. I am born in 1970. I'm a firstborn Jewish male. I was born in New York, in the East Coast in the 70s. Everything about me is bred to be a chauvinist. Everything inbred in me is to think women are 1 or more degrees less important than me. It's my culture. It's where I grew up. It's the age. It's the end of the Mad Men time.
Yeah, it was like when you said the 70s in New York, I'm like, that's Mad Men.
Right,
that's
exactly.
Eyeballs in the Office.
Exactly. So I am born and bred to be that. And I was that until this guy, Erwan, said to me, hey, do you know your wife's crying? Like, I was just, odds are I was going to live my entire life a nice guy, but a chauvinist, a misogynist, like all these things inside of me. And that one moment in time, which I could easily have non-confronted, I easily could have pushed away, some voice in me said, listen, and see if you want to uplevel your life with that. That was the only difference between me and the path I was headed on to really end up more like my father, who's a chauvinist. It's like, you look at him, he is a chauvinist. He's a good guy, but he's a chauvinist. Like, so that one moment, and everyone has the opportunity to change their lives and all the generations that follow.
We're all in the driver's seat of our own lives.
Right.
We can do whatever it is that we want. So I read this thing a while ago because I've been wondering, like, the same question, because in my travels, I was like, gosh, the common thread that I see is that men just have this overwhelming compulsion to control women. And I'm like, why is that? Like, I don't care what any of you are doing. Like, go knock yourself out. Just, don't do it in my way. And I read this article, and it's about how when boys are toddlers, they, in their growing, they're, exploring the world around them, they eventually crawl away from their mom to go explore the world because they're growing. That's what they're supposed to do. You can't stay on the tit forever. And according to this article that says that when boys do that, up until that time, they have their full attention and command of their mom. They can scream and cry and get her attention whenever they want, get food whenever they want. Whatever their little brains want, they can control her and they can get it because they have that communication and she wants to. That's what your relationship is supposed to be like. But then when they crawl away, they go explore their world and become toddlers and figure it out and keep going. In their minds, subconsciously, their mom pulled away from them. They didn't pull away from her. And they're somehow want to keep that going for their infantile state. They want to keep that ability to control. Do you feel like there's any truth to that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, my therapist, I'm a second marriage, and I'm now a stepfather to 2 girls.
Okay.
9 and 11. Met them when they were 4 and 6. And my therapist saved me, and he said, children are narcissistic. And you want them to be narcissistic. You want them to understand and separate and everything about them. And at some point, you want to decrease the narcissistic viewpoints into self-creating community and connection.
Okay.
And so it totally makes sense from that point of view that it's happening to me as a boy.
Yeah.
Because either we're innocent or guilty. And for me to be innocent, you have to be guilty. And for me to be guilty, that means you have to be innocent. So it's a dichotomy in that shape or form. So definitely I can see that.
Okay, so my next question is, since you seem to know these things, why is there a need to feel chauvinistic, like, oh, this person's like less than me?
It's not even a need. It is a computer program. It's software. It's software in your operating system that you have no idea.
That you don't even know that it's there.
I'm still a chauvinist. I can still feel that software inside of me. I've just upgraded my operating system to know not to run that program. It's like, Windows 98, which is actually the year it started to wake up.
Yeah.
But it really is Windows 98. I don't want to run that operating system. I want to run whatever Mac, whatever Snow Leopard, whatever I have now. But the point is that it's just a program that's instilled in us. It's 6,000 years of the patriarchy. The patriarchy has been around for 6,000 years. Okay, this is
that we can count.
Well, the historians basically say when we went from egalitarian, basically everyone just trying to survive, into the patriarchal, where all genders, and I do mean there are multiple even back then, said, hey, let's have men kind of run the show because they're stronger and they can protect, and the warring and the killing.
Yeah, happen. I mean, I think it makes sense under those circumstances because, breastfeeding is a full-time job.
Right.
And men can't do it.
Right.
So
it totally made sense 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, it made sense at the time.
Right. So 6,000 years ago. And so here we are, if you look at the timeline, if you go back to 1848, the women's suffrage movement was the first time where it said, okay, let's have the right to vote. Women as property was still in the books until the late 1880s. Then you had the 19th Amendment in 1920. Less than 100 years ago, women got the right to vote. Then in the 1940s, where there was like this peak up of women, like Rosie the Riveter, or women coming into the workforce, and
because they had to,
they
shoulder
had
to the wheel.
Exactly. And then what happened? If you read the Feminine Mystique, Betty Friedson's book, they try to push women right back into that home,
Absolutely.
right back. All magazines, all advertising was about women being shoved back, but like you can't pour that
you can't
wine
put
glass.
The freak back in the cage.
Exactly. There's no more. And then 1970s, 60s, and 70s is where everything really blown up. But if you look at that 6,000 years of the patriarchy, since 1970, women still couldn't get their own credit card without a husband's signature in the 1970s. So here we are, a mere 50 years later, with 6,000 years of programming, software on top of software, that men are 1 degree or more degrees higher than women. And the epic evolution of the last 50 years has led to total mayhem, women rising in power economically, sexually, politically, the metoo movement, all these things really fast. And men are confused, women are confused, and
we're all confused.
We're all confused.
We're all very, very confused as to what to do. So then that's part of your, I would say, the cornerstone of your mentoring,
right.
Of like, how do we deal with this life in the world of they call it the Me Too era, but I think we're going to continue for this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't think this is going to have an end point. Like,
Right.
I think it's just going to continue and evolve, just like everything else has. But a lot of people say that, like, oh, well, men don't know what to do, or so. How have you been mentoring and teaching men what to do?
First thing I tell people, I have a cycle, it's in the book. It's the first step of any change is to confront. You have to stop.
You got to name the puppy.
You got to name the puppy. You got to take down those blinders. You have to see. You have to confront. You have to look at, oh, I've had 3 relationships that haven't worked out, or I'm in a job that I hate, or I'm 40 pounds overweight, or I'm addicted to porn, or whatever it is. You have to stop, take down the blinders, take a look in the mirror, and say, this thing is not working in my life. The first step is to confront. The second step is to investigate. We live in the most information-rich time.
You can
go
have
to
whatever
Google.
information you want.
Some might be contrary, but you can still go and research, find great books, great articles, Facebook groups. There's a plethora of information, so investigate. The third is the most important, is you need to commit. I am committing to change. It doesn't have to be a big change. It could be, I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to improve my communication with my wife. I want to stop abusing porn. Commit to that. Then after that commitment, make a practice, which may include having a coach or a therapist or a 12-step group. Make a practice, something. Don't do it alone. You can't do it alone, basically. You can, but much
Help
much
yourself.
easier. Yeah.
Let someone help you.
Right. Build a practice. Do it for a set period of time, as short as 28 days or longer. And then when you're done with that cycle, review, see how you did, debrief, and then decide if you want to do it again. And then keep up-leveling your life step by step. And so that's what I often recommend people, is just this 5-step process to go from point A to point B.
Wonderful. So I was reading in your situation that men feel like the script that they were given by their predecessors is no longer working for them. Can you talk about like what that script was and how it's basically been flipped?
I mean, if you just look across the board, let's go back to our last 50 years, the scripts of my father. My father was born in 1941, and I was born in 1970. So the script he gave me was I was supposed to get a job, have a 401k, have 2 kids, grandchildren really more than children, but have children, take care of my financial security. This script, this hackneyed script. I was also supposed.
It was a grocery list.
It was a path. It was like a map of how to be successful. I mean, my father's called me a financial failure. He's called me a biological failure because I'm not living the life that he thought it would be. In that script at 28, I was nailing it. I was normal. I was, going for a 401k.
You were taking things off this grocery list. I had the 6-figure salary. Seriously, I had, working downtown San Francisco, I had it. I had the house. I had the wife. I had all the things, but I was miserable. I was overweight. I, didn't know my wife. We were like 2 ships passing in the night. It was miserable. But because I'd followed the script, I had what's called cognitive dissonance. I thought this was supposed to make me happy. I was told that this was it.
Right. You told me, Dad, if I did these 47,000 things, I would be happy. But I'm a workaholic. I'm 40 pounds overweight, and I don't know this woman. We're definitely not having sex. So it's like the script didn't work for me.
How sad.
How sad and how wonderful at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you got to be like, see. The mirror.
Right.
It's not working.
Well,
Look in it.
I was lucky. I was lucky for my first wife, Carol.
Yeah.
Which I hold deep, deep respect and gratitude, because she was the one who said, hey, this isn't working. I was like, what? I'm working. We have a house. Blah, blah, blah. It really came like, no.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, this isn't working. And so she was the white rabbit that led me down the rabbit hole. She was the one who said, let's go to Burning Man. Let's go to
Anwar's class.
Exactly. Anwar's class. Yeah, she really was the catalyst for me to change, and so grateful for that experience. So sometimes it takes someone else to say, you could be more. There's so much more.
You could be more. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about like the fear within the Me Too movement, because I'm always hearing and seeing everywhere about how men are scared of the things that are happening with Me Too. So how are you dealing with like the fear in your clients?
I get this question a lot, and it's funny. It's really more from women than men. Women tend to ask this question more than men.
Really?
To ask me this question. I don't, this is my experience. A lot of mothers tend to, I'm not saying your mother, but a lot of mothers will ask this question. I'm worried about my son. He's X, Y, and Z. And I basically said, teach him to be a gentleman. Teach him to be a gentleman.
Easy enough, yeah.
Really simple. It's maybe not easy to implement, but be a gentleman. And here's what a gentleman does. A gentleman is available for feedback. A gentleman asks for consent. A gentleman takes his time. A gentleman pays attention. Because we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to...
Yeah, we're not going to be 100% of the time. Right, it's impossible.
Right. Back to Brene Brown, like, if you're not, risking mistake, you're not in the arena. You're actually not, living. So you're going to make mistakes. The difference between, in my opinion, someone like a Matt Laurel or a Trump or, or a Weinstein is they were refusing to take feedback. A lot of feedback. Weinstein had a lot of feedback.
Hundreds and hundreds. An entire town full of feedback.
Right, feedback he just ignored. And so a gentleman would be like, the first time the feedback comes up, all right, how do I do this better? Apologize, validate. And so in my opinion, for men in this Me Too era or this Me Too world or this Me Too whatever it's going to be a gentleman and just go slow. Go at the speed of sensation. Pay attention. The whole Aziz story was fascinating to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Like really fascinating. To me, my opinion, from the article was a year ago, I guess.
Oh, I think it was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Right, a year and a half ago. Basically, he was just a dumb guy doing dumb things, and the woman, wasn't honest about what was happening. I'm not saying she was innocent. They were both co-created the situation.
That was because I knew Aziz, and I threw him off a couch in an audition.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, because he's so much smaller than me, and we were doing this improv thing for funny people, and I'm like, kick. But I was like, they both weren't using their voice.
Right.
And everyone has a duty to use your voice. And if you got to drop bows on somebody, then by all means drop bows on somebody.
Right.
But you're both creating a problem for yourselves.
Right.
You're not doing the right thing, and you're not doing the right thing. Therefore, like your wife said, this is not working.
Right. And if he was a gentleman, he would have noticed. He would have had the acumen, I'm sure he has it now, but he would have had the acumen and awareness to be like, she said no, what does this mean? So being a gentleman is just paying more attention, going slow. And again, consent. So easy to do it, well, and not ruin the mood. There's always a fear of consent,
Well, if you're going to ruin the mood, guess what, buddy? There was no mood.
Right. Did you see Hitch, the Will Smith movie, Kevin James?
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, that is the ultimate version of consent. Do you remember the scene? He walks up to the stairs and says, okay, you lean. Will Smith says, you lean in 90% and you let her come the last 10%. That's consent. That's him saying, I'm interested, I'm willing to take the risk, I'm showing desire,
right here.
but I'm not going the last 10%, and then wait for the woman to cross the last 10%. Of course, Kevin Jane kissed him, and that was hilarious. But the point is, don't do that. Just go 90%, and that's a great version of consent. I have a desire to kiss you. How do you feel about that? Well, I'm sorry, you're really not my type. Or, I'm feeling energy between, but I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
Great. And then if she says no, then she's not rejecting you. She's just rejecting your offer.
Yeah. Well, then I think there's a lot to be said about, taking rejection. And because, me personally, I'm very, I've never liked anybody. I'm an old curmudgeon since day one. I'm like, nah, you don't want none of this. No, you don't even want this. Go somewhere else. But I've always been I feel like a lot of guys, they just play the numbers game, and they're just they just go up to anybody and let's do blah, 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 blah. And you're like, you don't even know me.
Right.
And I would always say, I am a giant bitch. You don't want any of this.
Right.
You're mistaken. But I think a lot of people wouldn't be met with so much rejection and feel some type of way about it if they didn't take so many risks on getting rejected that weren't even worth it.
Well, how about this? Learn to love rejection.
That too.
Learn to appreciate rejection. Learn to use it for your
fast
awareness.
no is second to a yes.
Right. It's really, I'm not saying no doesn't mean no. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying like, oh, what had you reject me? What is it about my approach? And sometimes a no can turn into a yes, but if you act like a man-child with the no, the chances of getting a yes
are zero.
Right? So it's like, oh, enjoy the rejection. I had a colleague back in my One Taste days. He would actually get turned on by rejection. So women would just, I don't know, he was an interesting fellow. He was an interesting character. His face would get red, his whole body would turn. You could just watch him get turned on by rejection because he enjoyed the play of it. So again, it's really, no definitely means no, and who you are in the face of rejection, maybe not with that woman, but going forward to learn, that's the master.
That's 100% true. I think it's in all my places I've been, I've always had guys coming up to me in my ear or whatever, and I can really only think of less than 5 guys that had any kind of game that worked out for them or even didn't.
Yeah.
I remember I had this one guy come up to me in a mall, and he was like, oh, blah, 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 just saying the things, and I'm like, actually, honey, I have a boyfriend. I'm the wrong person, but you were very sweet. And he's like, well, you can't be mad at me for having good taste. I'm like, you know what? I can't. Sent him on his merry way. And talking about him years later, it's like, you're right. Who you are in the face of rejection says a lot about you as a person. Mm-hmm. A lot. And I have a lot of people write to me or they'll talk to me like, oh, like this guy tried to get my phone number. And then I was like, no, that's not a thing. And they just lost their mind in a gas station. Mm-hmm. Or when I was in India, I was interviewing girls that, the first time, I was interviewing girls that live in an acid attack survivor house, and they have had their faces literally burned off for turning down marriage proposals, rejecting guys, of the smallest rejection. There was this one woman, oh gosh, it was so terrible. Her and her husband lived in this village with their son. And I guess these like village guys were always like, oh, we want to sleep with you. And she was like, no, I'm married, I'm a kid, go bother somebody else. Like, leave me alone. Like, you're barking up the wrong tree. And they snatched her 2-year-old boy and doused him in acid and then threw him in a dumpster because she wouldn't. The married lady with the child who had zero interest in them, and they should have had zero interest in her.
Right.
That was her punishment.
That hurts.
For rejecting them. And now this child who was doused in acid as a 2-year-old has to live with this for the rest of his life. But the thing that I asked the girls, though, I was like, okay, so a lot of them get attacked with acid because they turned down a marriage proposal, which apparently is like a huge deal. So I asked one of the girls, her name's Sapna, I was like, so you were with this guy and he was like, let's get married, and you're like, you know what, like this is cool, but you're not like the long-term dude for me. I want to stay in school, I want to do this, I want to do that. So then he tries to throw acid on you and you're like, yeah, I told you that I didn't want to be with you, like because you're not the right person, like you just proved me right. And they're like, yeah, basically.
Insanity.
Essentially, yeah. Insanity. It's like, but,
and what has men so much personalizing rejection? What is it? What is there? I talk a lot about the external validation of men. Men are external validation junkies. People are, but men really are.
Yeah.
We look externally for knowing we're doing it right. The attractive wife, the job, the car, the stock portfolio, the power. We're looking externally to know that we're a good man. What I teach men is internal validation. I'm a good man. I'm a good man. I'm a good man. And all these things are happening outside of me is the gravy to my own self-belief, my own self-esteem.
Yeah, those are the byproduct
they are the
of being a good man, not the product.
And because if you have no internal validation muscle or fortitude, then when you do get rejected by the external, of course you go down. And of course you make meaning around it or connotation around it. So what I teach men is to stand up straight. I have something I wrote called the New Seduction Experience, which is actually the new non-toxic seduction. And basically the whole concept is of standing up straight in your own power, being so strong that the wind couldn't blow you down. You're like the reed by the river, swaying with the rejection. And our ability to stand straight and hold our own core is actually what makes us more attractive than these guys who are constantly grasping, validate me, validate me.
Oh,
validate
absolutely.
Me.
I always say that, like, there's very few things that are sexier than responsibility, like having integrity and confidence.
Right.
Because as much as it pains me to say this, having a partner is a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
So if you have a partner that's coming to you that just on baseline is going to be a lot of work, and then if they have these extra needs on top of that because they have insecurities or this, that, and the other thing, like you're just adding like piles and piles and piles of work that you have to get through to maybe be okay and get through to the other side. And that's a tough situation.
Indeed.
And there's, again, I hate to say it but it pains me, but it's the truth. No woman besides raising her children wants to raise a man.
Right.
I couldn't think of anything that is less sexy than having to raise your partner.
Right.
It does not feel good at all.
Right. And that takes awareness on both people's parts.
Absolutely.
Because women are actually trained to be maternal. They will often...
It's a thing that you got to fight so hard.
You have to become aware of it. Wow, I really am carrying both of us in this relationship. Oh, I really do look like him as a child. Oh, how much have I let him get away with because I want to avoid the fight. I want to avoid the tension. Things are going good enough. They're not, good is the enemy of great.
The ship's it might be taking on water, but it's not sinking. We're still afloat.
Right. In a couple I'm coaching, her whole job is to say no to things to mediocrity. Like any of his behaviors that she deems mediocre, she's saying, no, I'm not going to accept that. It doesn't mean you have to change. It means I'm not going to accept that. I'm not
accepting it. So if you want to be over here.
Right. If you want to get some nookie, you got to up-level your game. And the funny part is he really does want to up-level his game, but they haven't had the honesty in relationship, and they've co-created him being a man-child. So, in the book, you picked out that one section, we've co-created this mess. Men, all genders, I like to use the word all genders have really co-created this mess. I'm not saying one is less than the other. I'm just saying we've all participated.
We have all participated because we're all involved in this, whether we like it or not.
Right.
It's just, it is the way that it is, and we have, as a people, we have to come together and figure that out. There's been a lot of talk about the future is female and this, that, and the other thing, and I vehemently disagree because we're both here for a reason, and no one's going anywhere. So we have to do that. This is an all hands on deck endeavor. We all have to put in work on this. We all co-created this mess.
Right.
This is all us together, and we have to untangle ourselves and figure it out.
And women want good men.
We do. They bag all day, every day.
Yeah, we want good men. They want men who are willing to listen and willing to step up. And this is another thing I tell women these days is don't lower your bar. Keep raising your bar, because you know what? Men actually do like the challenge. And if they don't like the challenge, they go back to the porn and the video game and their bros. If they're looking for the extended
adolescence, you don't want none of that anyway.
Let them go. But, men, good men, and there are a lot of good men, we actually tend to look more like nerds than, just so you know, the nerds.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but the point is that we do like the challenge if done with connection. When women vomit their angst, when they nag, when, they shoot daggers, no, we don't want to hang around. But if a woman sets up a good game for a man,
he will play with enthusiasm.
Yeah. My wife said to me, I think I want a house. Oh, I think I want a house in Los Angeles. Oh, I think I want a house in a pool, 4 bedrooms. I saw the number of zeros, and there were many.
The decimal points were just extrapolating out.
And I was like, oh, that's a good game. So I enjoy that. Okay, let's figure it out. Let's do it together. And then together we're co-creating this game of how to get this house. So again, it's women setting the bar high, creating good games, and men saying, okay, let's play. I don't know if I can do it, but at least we'll have the adventure of a lifetime.
Trying.
Finding out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always, I always hear people who are like, oh, well, men hate women and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, I don't feel like that's totally true. I feel like a lot of this patriarchal situation came about because of men's love of women, because they do want to take care of us and have this, mutual relationship and things like that. I do think men genuinely like that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stuck around this long. But it's become kind of disjointed in a way of no, I want to have my own life as my own person, but I want to have this togetherness as a couple as well, and trying to manage those two things.
Yeah. 2 things pop up when you say that. One is a saying my teacher would say to me. He said that men are tender kegs of affection looking for a place to go off. we're just so much love, we don't know how to do it. We're a big, we're those Dalmatian, the St. Bernards. We're big St. Bernards with big tongues and big paws and we're licking everything, right? So we're just big dogs when it comes down to it. The second thing is men are scared shitless in this modern day, and that's what most women don't know. Like, the majority of men are scared shitless because the scripts that our fathers and grandfathers gave us are not working. We're looking at women dominating the schooling system. If you look at the statistics.
Yeah, I think women have more business licenses now than men do. All kinds of stuff.
The world is changing rapidly, and so again, the scripts that were handed us don't work. Men had 2/3 of graduate degrees in the 1970s. It's flipped. Women are now 2/3. They're dominating the school system. They're coming into the boardroom. It's just changing. It's not equal in any shape or form, but it is changing. And men don't know who to be. And here's the biggest impact is men are not given permission to say, I don't know, I'm scared. What do? We put on masks.
Yeah.
We fake it until we make it. But inside, most men are really nervous because I don't know how to be a good man, providing man in a world where women are getting more and more power.
Well, and I always see this thing where, guys are like, oh, women just want money and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, that's not really true, because I see a lot of chicks putting up with a lot for nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's not
so these guys are getting lucky somehow, and it's not with cash. I can tell you that right now. But I think there's some sort of thing, especially in men now, that they feel like that's all that they have to offer. Mm-hmm. But it's not true, though, because there's a whole other laundry list of things that women are looking for in a partner, a keyword partner, that aren't necessarily that.
Right.
When you don't come to the table with any of those other things on the laundry list, the last thing you've got going for you is maybe cash, possibly.
Right.
But even that doesn't last forever.
No. Women just... Here's the thing. So in the new seduction experience, so there are like all these steps, but the last step is to dance. Women want dancing partners. They want men who are willing to switch from square dancing to swing dancing to break dancing to standing still. It's like you're learning jazz piano. Mm-hmm. You start off learning your scales. You have all the scales. You get the basics. And then what's the second step of being a great jazz pianist? You learn to improvise. You learn to use the scales to become a great improviser in the moment. That's what women want. Women want men to be able to have the scripts, to do the work, to understand, to read the books, to listen to the podcasts, to take the workshops, to understand the basics of what it means to relate and succeed with a modern woman. And then they want you to throw out those damn scripts because that is not happening in the moment. And men complain, like, I never know what she wants. Well, that's because you won't pay enough attention to pay to
I'm
hear.
sure if you asked, she'd tell you verbatim.
If you asked politely and said thank you regardless of the answer. Like, that's the thing. It's just like we have to be in a place where men are willing to lean in, be vulnerable, have all their ideas shaken up, and then like, oh, that's a much more fun game than me by myself. Rob Kandall by himself could have a happy life. Rob Kandall with his wife Morgan has an explosively fun, dynamic life. It's the partnership with the wild feminine with a big appetite, and me over here with the providing skills. That's where the most fun happens.
I dig it. Well, I think that's why Derek Jackson does so well, is because at the very basis of what the stuff that he talks about is that he put in the effort. He found a lady and he was like, this is the person that I put in effort for. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to go find out.
Right.
And he did. And everybody's like, this man knows what he's doing.
Right.
And they're, vehement followers to the point where he gets hate mail. It's like, how dare you tell these ladies to level up and not put up with this shit. Now I'm out here left with nothing because I don't want to put in any effort. And I feel like effort is a beautiful thing. Like, what else is there for you to do?
Yeah, it's super fun. They're going to sit around, looking at another CNN or watching another Netflix movie. No, learn to dance with a powerful woman. And I use the powerful woman as a woman who can just be herself in your company. It doesn't mean powerful in the boardroom or powerful.
Yeah.
It's just powerful means that you co-create the environment where she can authentically be who she is. And the truth is, she doesn't really know who she is yet because she's never been with a man who said, yes, I want to know that. Oh, show me that. Ooh, that's interesting.
Please, love it when a man can teach them things. Love.
Right. That's confronting. I might need to walk around the block for a second, but thank you for telling me. And then, the woman, like, I learned so much from Morgan, and Morgan learns, and that's why we have such a dynamic relationship, is because she's a master in a certain arena I have no interest in, and yet shows me things that builds interest, and I do the same thing on a different level of abstraction. It's just, that's where the fun begins.
Totally. I mean, I feel the same way about my own relationship, because you get into relationships with people and, like, I'm not, like, a big planner of, like, oh, I'm going to go out with this person or whatever. Yeah. Like, that's not even, it wasn't even on my radar at the time. And I will tell, and whenever I do Playboy Radar, they're like, tell us how Steven escaped the friend zone again. Because he was on the tippy top of the do not date list for 4 years and then weaseled his way off. Yeah. But I think, like, being in a relationship that it's a real partnership, you're both putting in not 50-50, 110 and 110, that's where you get to go places. And if you're somebody who wants to go places, not sit around and do nothing, that is most certainly the way to do it, is to be like, okay, well, whatever the answer is, just to get an answer. Right. Whatever the answer is, just accept the information. Like you said, say thank you and be like, okay, I'm either going to go process this, or I get it, or I don't get it. I need further, whatever it is, but just being okay within yourself to ask and receive an answer. Doesn't matter what it is, because you can't do anything without that first step.
Beautiful.
I read in your thing that you said that, back to the external validation thing, about how men, when they were like, oh yeah, the ladies did really great on these test scores, how do you think you're going to do, or how they performed, they were very hung up on it. But when you told women the same thing, they're like, yeah, whatever.
I'm not sure exactly which that is.
Here, let me pick it. Well, I don't think I can pick it up out of
That's fine.
But apparently there was some study that they were giving men and women, like, some sort of, like, test, like an academic test.
Okay.
And they said, okay, they told the guys, like, okay, the women did really well on this.
Oh, right.
Like, how well do you think you're going to do?
Right.
And it greatly affected their answers.
Right.
Whereas women were like, I don't know, and just did the test and they got what they got.
Exactly. Well, it's just different rules. I think that has to go back to chauvinism, has to go to being one step up. It's because men compare themselves. We're game players. We really are trained to look at sports. We're trained to look at what I like to call what James Carse and Simon Sinek has now wrote a book on, the concept of finite versus infinite games. A finite game is one where you play win or loss. There's set rules and concepts. An infinite game is one where you just want to continue to play. So men
it's a really long board game.
Well, it is a lifetime. It's an infinite board game, basically. And then infinite games are made up of finite games, but finite games do not include infinite games. So men like to win because what do? We get external validation from the winning. Women just tend to want to play. Of course that's important to them. And women do have masculine attributes. I'm not saying all women don't have this win-loss thing. They certainly do.
Yeah, well, some people are competitive and some people aren't. That's just the way we all are.
But women, because they weren't part of the boys' club, because they weren't invited to the game, they're like, okay, we're going to play my own game. And my own game is, one of connection and one of collaboration. Men tend to be more solo hunters, wanting to kill, bring home the meat, and succeed.
Bring home the meat and succeed.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, just in my personal experience, I feel like that, especially now that women have all these degrees and all these business licenses and they're, we're really leveling up, that men don't care about that. Like, it doesn't make a difference to them one way or the other. Like, is she hot? And that's...
Well, is she hot in day 1, but then in day 30, then they start to compare themselves to the women. There's a book called The End of Men by Hannah Rosen. Really stellar book, one of the biggest, really amazing book, and talk about the impact of women being in the driver's seat, where, being the primary moneymaker, the financial contributor of the family, and how that impacts. Most men are really in depression, don't know how to deal with it, don't know who to be. Polarity in terms of a woman in power, in her masculine, the sex goes out of the relationship, they become more friends. And so, there are men to be like, great, there's men I've interviewed be like, great, she's obviously smarter and better at this than I am, I'm going to support her. But most men have their ego attached, their validation attached to the job and being one degree better than the women they're with. And they tend to not succeed in relationships.
So we need more stay-at-home dads. That's what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it's what we need is an awareness of it, confronting it, and then getting in agreement with it.
And just accepting the situation for what it is. Yeah, I read there was an interesting story in the End of Men. Or was this? That was written during the recession, I think.
I think it published in 2012.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was probably 2009. Yeah. Yeah.
She was, because I remember this one lady talked about how, like, I think they lived on the East Coast or something, and she was like, I was with this guy, we have a kid together, I'm supporting all of us, and she's like, I can't, the kid has to get fed, I have to get fed, I can't feed you too, dude, you gotta go. And
yeah,
that's,
I remember that section.
Yeah, and I was like, oh man, and she's like, we're fine, just her and her daughter, she's like, we're cool, it's fine, and he's off God knows where, probably living in a car or something, I don't know, but
that book talked about the loss of 6 million industrial jobs lost in the first decade of this century that were primarily run by men. So, you can look at automation, you can look at robotics, you can look at where the world's going.
I'm from Detroit, I get it.
Okay, yeah. So
I get it, let me tell you.
Men are losing those primary positions. My job, Michael Kimmel talks about this in Angry White Men, another great book. Basically the concept of that woman, that minority is taking my job away from me. Nope, it's not your job. You may have held it for all these 6,000 years, but this time is over. The world is changing. And so for men to learn new skills, especially around the concept of emotional intelligence, empathy, communication, collaboration, the ability to work in teams, this is what men need to learn to keep up with women who are really taking over more and more positions in society because they're better at it.
Well, I've been talking about my friends lately, and I'm like, because of that nurturing thing, especially when you have children involved, women will kill themselves. They will work themselves to death to provide for that situation because it's what God made us to do, basically. Right. So when you take the partner aspect out of it, when the father of that child, it kind of doesn't matter what he's doing because that mom will work to death, basically. So I think that goes back to that external and internal validation situation, that men have a different priority in that working themselves to death than women do. And we have a major disparity there, basically.
Yeah. Michael Kimmel calls it aggrieved entitlement.
Yeah.
I read several of his books. He's an amazing writer. I actually got in a little trouble with Me Too as well. So that someone told me that. I don't know the details of that. Someone just whispered that in my ear. So, but still, his books are great.
We love whispers on the show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure.
It's our favorite. It's our favorite thing, actually.
But he talked about this concept of aggrieved entitlement, and just like when it comes to women entering the workforce, well, they're still maintaining all the household hours and chores. There's still a disproportionate women still working a full-time job and still running the family.
Absolutely.
And men are working the same amount of hours and maybe a little bit more. But there's just these statistics, and it's just like, to me, it's just like, okay, men, it's like, wake up. Like, this could actually be the best party, the best time in our history for men to be. We're hanging out with empowered, sexually curious, financially stable women. It could be the best party if you stop whining, if you stop sitting in your aggrieved entitlement, then you can actually have the most fun that any of our predecessors ever had.
Totally, because we all get to contribute and we all get to benefit like equally as a situation. Totally, yeah. And I was thinking about that too, because another thing that I talk to my friends with at great lengths is like, your workload at home. Because there's kind of that famous thing of like, my wife left me because I put dishes next to the sink, basically, of like, it was a big deal to her. I didn't care about it. So she was like, well, I guess you don't care then, bye, to simplify it. But that's true though, because it's really, really hard to come home and still have to do all of the chores. And this, if you guys don't know, there's a gigantic Facebook group that's all of ladies in LA, and I think it's like 45,000 deep. So we all know things. We all tell each other things. So if you think you can pull any business around here, you can't. But she was like, yeah, I'm leaving out of town for some work trip, and I had to spend 90 minutes making a video for my husband to show him where things are in our house. It's like, you also live here. How do you not know this thing? And she's like, okay, ladies, like, make me a list of, like, things that he needs to know, because I got to cover all my bases, because I'm going to be gone, and if, like, our kids need something, he needs to know where it's located. And I'm like, doesn't he also live there? Like, isn't it also his house?
Well, my practice every night is to do the dishes with my wife, Morgan.
Yeah.
I work, 10, 12 hours. It doesn't matter. I do that with her. She also often says, thank you for helping. And my response is, I'm not helping.
You're doing.
I'm doing. This is our job.
Absolutely.
This is something we do together. And we have it down to a science. Like, she's a much better dishwasher than I am, and she lets me know that. And so I, like, put the food away, I make the, and bring all the dishes, make it really easy.
Yeah.
But it's so enjoyable. And I can see just these little things. Like, it's not hard to really impress a woman with these little things.
We're actually very easily impressible, as it turns out.
Well, because of all my brothers who have just not even considered it. And every household is different. Every woman is different. And so just to have that vulnerable conversation, hey, I want to be more involved in co-owning this house. I want to understand all aspects of this. She's a much better cook than I am, but I'm still happy to be her sous chef.
Yeah.
Would that make you happy? I take out the trash.
Because you both got to eat.
Exactly. And so it's really back to the basics of transparency, connection, communication.
Okay, so talking about your brothers and that, what is their hang-up in not doing that? What you find is a very simple activity. Why are they so grated by it? Like, I will not do this.
Well, obviously, I think it's the scripts.
Yeah.
We didn't see our fathers do it. I don't think I've ever seen my father do a dish in my entire life.
And you're like, I'm not even sure he's even picked up a sponge.
He started cooking when he actually loves to cook.
Okay.
But he started cooking when he retired in his, 50s and 60s. But I never saw him cook. I don't know if he even took out the trash. Like, I don't know. He worked. He was a workaholic and worked all the time. He came home. He put his keys on the counter. He had his Kahlua and cream. We had dinner. And then I'm not sure what happened after that. But there was an order of things.
Yeah.
But I never saw him go outside this Mad Men stereotypical man-woman dynamic. And for my brothers to be like, the world has changed. It's not changing. It is changing. But it has changed from these scripts. And so willing to be like, even though it worked for my father and grandfather, it may not work for your current partner. This is the point. So get curious and ask.
You're married to her, not your daddy.
Yeah, exactly. Or your mother.
Yeah, or absolutely. Well, that's really interesting because I'm always having this conversation with my grandma. Although I'm not a person I don't really have parents. Like, I'm not influenced by them. So when people are like, oh, well, my parents, I'm like, tell me about this. This is very interesting, fascinating concept to me. But she's always kind of getting on everybody. It's like, he worked all day, and, like, you need to do this, and you need to do that. And it's like, actually, we both work today. Right. And I think, because my grandpa was a coal miner, and then they moved up north, and he got a steel job. And, like, I get that level of tired that she's talking about in those, intensely physical, laborious jobs. Yeah. I get what you're talking about. Right. I see what you're saying. It just doesn't apply to
typing on the keyboard.
Yeah, for 8 hours. Like, yes, you're working, and that is a thing.
And
but
raising 2 kids, carpooling, tantrums, energetic, food shopping, food cooking.
Yeah.
Women are also exhausted.
Yeah.
Like I do everything I can to do these little things. Like, can I pick up food on the way home? Do you want me to pick up the kid from the play date? Just these little things.
Yeah.
And it's just like, one less thing on her to-do list that she can pass on to me. And I'm just so grateful for that because I can feel, because I let go of the script that she should handle. I produce the money in the relationship because I'm good at making money. It's like I think and I can make money. Like that is just my skill. And
thank God for it.
Right. And at the same time, I don't want to be, because I make the money, again, agreed entitlement, you should do A, B, and C. We have open, vulnerable conversations about, okay, how do we do this together? How do we live together?
Totally. Well, I always compare that to, like, okay, like, if that is, you have that, that relationship of he goes to work and makes the money and you stay home and take care of the house and the kids and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's great. But just like, she's not out here just racking up bills for the sake of doing it for you to pay. You're not over here racking up messes for her to clean up.
Right.
Just because for the sake of doing so. Like it's a both, like if you had a bill come in the mail because she went to Saks and dropped $3,000, you'd be like, what is this?
Right.
Just like if you drop socks and 10 dirty dishes on a floor in some obscure room in your house, she's not going to be like, what is this? What did you do? I just vacuumed this. It's the same thing.
Right.
Just different consequences.
Yep. Yeah. It's time, and all it takes is confronting, researching, committing, and building practices. Little baby practices too.
Do you feel like you're not just your clients because you're personally coaching them, but like as a whole, like do you think like people are becoming more conscious of this process and like how to survive this, or do you think there's still
I think in terms of
disconnect?
I think in terms of the bell curve, I think there's the percentage of men who are really getting it, and I know a lot of them. I know a lot of great teachers. I'm also on the left coast bubble.
Yeah. That's true.
And then I think the other end of the bell curve spectrum, that guys would be angry. They tend to be like the Trump supporters. They would actually be angry at this conversation. But I really talk to the middle. I really talk. The book is written. It's a pragmatic guide. It's not complicated. I actually wanted a more esoteric book. I wanted like a tome. You'd have to read a chapter and take a walk around the block.
Yeah.
That was kind of my ego. Yeah, that was my ego wanted. But then the feedback I got was men are not going to read this. And so I wrote a pragmatic, easy to use, personal, vulnerable book where I show my own foibles in there. And the middle can read it. And I think there's hope for the middle, because I think the middle are not happy with their lives. They might be content.
I think that's the majority, or so I've heard.
Right. I think they might be content to unhappy, but I think they're not thrilled. And to me, just building simple changes in your life one after another, building your self-esteem. Self-esteem is built upon esteemable acts. The things you do, every action you do makes you more and more happy. And so you can build this life of practice and awareness and up-leveling. And so...
And isn't that what we drive all of these children to go do, all these self-esteem building activities, all their sports and their tutoring and this, that, and the other thing? It's like you're doing it for your kids, do it for yourself.
Right.
Or maybe that's just my outside looking in perspective.
Hopefully.
But
with good intention, it can be that. But there's some bad intentions in that.
Oh, yeah. That's why we have all these signs strapped to Little League fields, like, it's okay, just calm down. It's T-ball.
Yeah.
I get it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being
pleasure.
on No Filter Friday on Public House Media.
Thank you.
And what's your social media? Where can the people find you?
Everything can be found via the website, robertkandall.com. There's links there. It's robert.kandall on Facebook and Instagram. But everything can be found at robertkandall.com. I have my own podcast. It's called Tuff Love. Tuff Love, Tuff Love. But everything, you just go to robertkandall.com. It'll point you in the right direction.
Awesome. And your book, Unhidden, is available on Amazon, obviously, and anywhere else on your website?
It's on my website.
On your
website.
On
Amazon. Yes.
I haven't read it, but I can tell that it's a top recommended reading.
Well, please let me know. Let me know what you think.
For sure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, that's enough No Filter Friday on Public House Media. I will see you all next week.